We can deduce other divine properties from the concept of creation. If God is the creator, he must be personal, omnipotent, omniscient, self-existent, necessary, eternal, immutable, and good. First, the God must be personal, for the act of creation is an act of will. Here there is a difference between theism and many other views of God or the Absolute. According to Plotinus, the one from which everything emanates is suprapersonal. No properties can be ascribed to it. The very idea of animation, with its suggestion of a ray proceeding from the sun, is non-personal. Similarly, many pantheistic or monistic forms of religion or religious philosophy imply a non-personal view of God. Obviously, if pantheism is taken to its strict sense to signify an identity between God and the world, God must be impersonal to the extent that he is identical with impersonal processes. The non-personal character of the monist Absolute emerges with special clarity to those Hindu writings that ascribe Brahman as a reality to which all human categories are inapplicable. But an act of making implies a maker, and a maker must be personal. Also, the Creator must be omnipotent and omniscient. He must be omnipotent in two senses that this world can bear. If he is able to bring everything into being out of nothing, he must be capable of doing anything that is in accordance with his nature and will. Equally, he must be sovereign over, and so being in complete control of it, all he has created. He must too be omniscient. He must have a perfect knowledge of all his creatures, for the latter are simply projections of ideas that pre-exist in his mind. Examining the modes of God's sovereignty and omniscience can be seen later in this series of videos. On the topic of self-existent and self-sufficient, please follow the link above. Next, if God is the creator, he must also be immutable, in the sense that he cannot change in any of his properties. He cannot be thus changed either by a higher being, for there is no such being, or by his creatures, for they are totally dependent on and distinct from him. Moreover, if he exists necessarily, he must actualize all his properties simultaneously, for in any entity existence and essence, that an entity is and what it is, are though notionally distinguishable, ontologically inseparable. This entailment of God's immutability by his necessity can be put thus: if God could change in any of his attributes, he could change in all of them. Also, if he could change by the increase of an attribute, he could also change by the decrease of one. We cannot set limits to the contingency, but if God could decrease in some of his attributes, he could decrease in all of them, and so, eventually, he could pass out of existence altogether. And finally, the Creator must be good. If God were wholly evil, we could not explain the presence of goodness in his creatures. Also, if he were wholly evil, we should be compelled to affirm that unless his creation of the world was motiveless, he created it out of sheer malevolence. Yet does not the fact that we are evil as well as good compel us to attribute evil as well as goodness to God? It does not do so for the following reasons. Evil is teleologically as well. What is true by definition? Morally wrong because it thwarts the ends or goals of human nature. The only alternative to admitting that this is to pursue evil in the place of good for the sake of personal fulfillment. Therefore, if there is a God, evil must be contrary to his purpose in creating us. Of course, the problem of evil remains, and which we shall look into further in this video series. The divine attributes I have mentioned can also be inferred from the religious attitudes that the theist adopts towards God as the creator. Especially they can be inferred from prayer, worship, and the trust that worshippers place in God's providence. We could not pray to God unless He is personal. He would not be worthy of adoration unless He were good. We could not trust Him and commit ourselves wholly to Him unless He were also omnipotent, omniscient, eternal, immutable in wisdom, power, and love. Again, prayer, worship, and trust imply that God is the ultimate reality and that He is indestructible. Admittedly, theists do not normally arrive at believing God's attributes through any kind of inference. They obtain the belief on the authority of a tradition that they find confirmed in varying degrees by their own experiences. Nevertheless, the inference I have stated articulate the creeds of primary affirmation of believing God as the maker of all things.